Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting for January 12th, 2026. Please rise if you are able and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will the clerk please call roll?
Rachel Hulteen,
Present.
Dan Larson,
Present.
Kathleen Martell,
Present.
Scott Ohm,
Here.
Mike Okada,
Here.
Patrick Quinn,
Here.
Jenny Snell,
Here.
Susan Wood. Here. Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Councilors, in your packet, we have the City Council agenda or minutes, for the study session of December 1st, 2025, City Council meeting minutes for December 8th, 2025, and study session notes from December 15th, 2025. Do we have any changes? Seeing none, we will give those back to the clerk with our compliments. Thank you. Oh, did you have one? No, sorry. Okay. We'll go to approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes for tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we will go to our first proclamation tonight, or only a proclamation. If I can have Tracy Volkman from Jefferson County Public Health join me up here. Hi, Tracy. We have a proclamation tonight on radon gas. Whereas radon gas is an invisible, odorless, radioactive gas that threatens the health of our residents and their families. And whereas radon gas is a group 1 carcinogen known to cause lung cancer in humans with prolonged exposure. And whereas Colorado has been ranked Zone 1, an area with the highest radon potential possible by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And whereas Colorado residential radon data has shown 50% of Colorado homes tested as being at or above U.S. Environmental Protection Agency radon action level of 4.0, which is picocuries per liter of air. Sorry, I had to have Councilor Ohm sound that out with me earlier. Whereas any home in Wheat Ridge may have elevated levels of radon, even if homes in the same neighborhood do not. And whereas supporting recommended radon practices and policies to reduce radon exposure is important to protect our community's health and welfare. And whereas testing for radon is simple and inexpensive. And whereas identified radon problems can be fixed. And whereas Jefferson County Public Health, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the American Lung Association are supporting efforts to encourage Americans to test their homes for radon, have elevated levels of radon reduced, and have new homes built with radon-resistant features. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Corey Stites, Mayor of Wheat Ridge, and the City Council hereby proclaim January 1st through 31st, 2026 as National Radon Action Month in Jefferson County. In witness thereof, on this 12th day of January 2026. Thank you. You have 2 words to say?
Thank you. First off, Jefferson County Public Health wants to really thank the City of Wheat Ridge and City Council for your commitment to public health issues and community awareness. We appreciate your leadership in helping educate the residents about radon risks and the importance of testing and mitigation. Wheat Ridge residents can obtain free kits at jefferson.radon.com to test their homes, and your support plays a meaningful role in protecting the health and safety of our community, as Colorado is the highest risk for radon exposure. Thank you so much.
You want to take a picture, or we? Yeah. Thank you. We will next go to our public's right to speak. Citizens may come and speak for 3 minutes on anything not on the agenda for public's right to speak. We will also be taking comments tonight for our special study session, and it looks like we have somebody signed up for that. The city clerk has lights on her desk. If you look at the lights, if it's green, you still have time to go. If it's yellow, start wrapping it up. And if it's red, please do wrap up your comments. We have nobody signed up to speak for regular public comment tonight, so we will go to our special study session, and it looks like we have Morgan Richards.
Hello, I'm Morgan Richards. I live on Ames Street in Wheat Ridge. I'm a mom, small business owner, resident of Wheat Ridge for 26 years, and I'm also a member of the Inclusivity, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Committee. And I'm here tonight to strongly ask you to please proceed with an equity audit. I think this is a tool that we can learn from and evaluate situations. For instance, what was our response when there was a swastika on a mountainside? Because when we're silent, we normalize that which is oppressive and dehumanizing. And we see that it's increasing every week. And our state is a target. And so you all supporting the equity audit is so vitally important to the safety of everybody in our community. I also want to quickly ask you once again to continue to have our police departments back so that they can uphold the U.S. Constitution, our state constitution, and our state law to not comply with ICE unless there is a judicial warrant. I think that is imperative to the safety of our residents. We do not know what is ahead. All we have is one another, and we need you to lead. Thank you.
Thank you. We have nobody else signed up in the chambers tonight to speak, but we do have somebody, I believe, online. So we'll go to, and I apologize if I messed this up, Anlee Nee.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. If you want to go ahead
Thank
and just state your name and whether you live and work in Wheat Ridge, and then you'll have 3 minutes to go ahead and speak.
Yes, my name is Only Nee. I do not live in Wheat Ridge. I'm actually in Lakewood, just south. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to bring up the Lutheran Legacy campus redevelopment. I'm wondering if there has been any consideration of salvaging materials for reuse from the existing buildings getting taken down. For background on this question, I am a structural engineer at the company KLNA Engineers and Builders. My company led the deconstruction and salvage structural steel inventory management for the city of Boulder on the Boulder Community Hospital project. That project saw a lot of great success in terms of diverting materials from the landfill and providing salvage material to new construction projects, which really helps reduce the carbon footprint of new construction. And this included all types of materials, structural and architectural. And this Lutheran redevelopment is a really great opportunity for Wheat Ridge to achieve similar landfill diversions and contribute to the circular economy of construction materials, which is really imperative as a solution to the climate challenge within the building industry. So, with this being kind of a non-traditional, non-typical practice in the industry, I would really love to provide more detailed information on the lessons we learned from the Boulder project and the opportunity we see for this particular redevelopment project. We can present our case study on the Boulder project, answer any questions you guys all have, but ultimately in whatever format, I just really appreciate the chance to continue this conversation and explore the idea of deconstruction and material salvage for the project. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item number 1, our consent agenda. Councilor Okada, will you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce the consent agenda, starting with item number 1A. Resolution number 1-2026, a resolution designating official public notice posting locations for city public notices and publications in 2026. At issue, state statutes require that each municipality annually establish the location for posting public notices, as well as the newspaper in which the notices will be published. Local government entities are also allowed to publish notices online for public meetings. These include meetings at which the adoption of any proposed city policy, position, rule, resolution, regulation, or formal actions occurs, or meetings at which the majority or quorum of the body is in attendance. Consent agenda item 1B, a motion to cancel the March 16, 2026 City Council study session. At issue, the City Council study session on March 16th currently coincides with the NLC conference located in Washington, D.C. As multiple members of the City Council will be attending the NLC conference when this meeting is scheduled to occur, staff is requesting to cancel the March 16, 2026 study session. Consent agenda item 1C, a motion to approve monthly payments to Colorado Employer Benefit Trust, CEBT, for 2026 medical, dental, employee assistant program, and life insurance membership billing in amount not to exceed $2,775,977. At issue, the city offers employees a number of benefits in order to attract and retain high-quality workforce. In 2023, the city joined the Colorado Employer Benefit Trust to provide a greater choice than previously offered of medical plans along with dental, vision, employee assistant program, and life insurance coverage. January through December billing is estimated and budgeted in the amount of $2,775,977. Staff requests the approval of the estimated 2026 total expenditure so that monthly payments can be made in a timely manner. And consent agenda item 1D, a motion to approve payment to Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency, CIRSHA, for the 2026 property and casualty premium in the amount of $720,064. At issue, the Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency provides property and casualty coverage for the city of Wheat Ridge. The total premium payment due for 2026 is $720,064 and is split into quarterly payments.
Thank you. Councilor Okada, can I please have a motion on the consent agenda items number 1A through 1D?
I move to approve consent agenda items 1A through 1D.
And we have a second by Councilor Ohm. Will the clerk please poll the council?
All ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Going to agenda item number 2. Councilor Martell, will you please introduce this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce Council Bill number 1-2026, an ordinance amending the Code of Laws to align with certain provisions of state law. At issue, the ordinance amends the penalty authority of the municipal court for municipal code offenses, which are identical to state law offenses, including, importantly, theft and shoplifting. This change is required as a result of a December 22nd, 2025 decision of the Colorado Supreme Court.
Thank you. This is an item on first reading. This is to set the date and time of our public hearing. Councilor Martell, may I please have a motion?
I move to approve Council Bill 1-2026, amending the Code of Laws to align with certain provisions of state law. Order it published. Public hearing set for January 26, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. in City Council chambers, and if adopted, take effect 15 days after final publication as required by the Home Rule Charter.
Second.
That's a second by Councilor Snell. And will the clerk please poll the council?
Eight ayes, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 3. Councilor Larson, will you please introduce this?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a motion to elect the mayor pro tem. Each year, city council members elect by a majority vote a mayor pro tem who serves until their successor is elected. The election is conducted in accordance with Section 3B of the City Council Rules of Order and Procedure as follows. Mayor pro tem. At the first or second regular meeting in January of each year, the council shall elect a mayor pro tem who shall serve until their successor is elected. The procedure shall be as follows. The chair will announce that the floor is open for nominations for the position of Mayor Pro Tem. Nominations will be taken from city council members by voice. No second is needed. Each nominee will have the opportunity to address the council. A motion and a second is then in order to elect one of the nominees to the position of Mayor Pro Tem. If the motion is not carried, additional motions are in order until a Mayor Pro Tem is elected by a majority of council present.
Thank you, Councilor Larson. This is a motion by the council. I believe we probably don't have a staff presentation on this, no? So I will go ahead and open the floor up to nominations for Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to elect Councilmember Scott Ohm as Mayor Pro Tem, effective immediately to term to expire upon election of their successor.
We'll just take that as a nomination for right now, and then we'll do the motion afterwards. So we have Councilor Ohm. Do we have any other nominations? Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you. I would like to nominate myself for Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilor Hulteen. Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, we will go ahead and open up the floor to you two to go ahead and address the council. I guess we'll do it by. We'll do it by the way it was ordered. So, Councilor Ohm, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, fellow council members. And thank you, Councilmember Larson. It's a real honor to be nominated. I've had some conversations with some of you and, about trying to get support. I think, I'd like to say that I have a lot of respect for Councilmember Hulteen. Being Mayor Pro Tem is not something to take lightly. I've watched other people, the mayor be Pro Tem and the duties that are bestowed upon them. Trying to be a leader, and have the respect of the council is something that, would bring a lot of honor, to not just to me, but something that I'd want to share with the council. And so I'm going to, I'd like to be very humble about it. But I know that, whatever happens tonight, this is going to be something that I will keep trying and earn everybody's vote as time goes on. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Ohm. I am really honored at the opportunity to be considered for Mayor Pro Tem. I had the chance to serve in that role in 2022 through 2023. And I learned at that time that it's there's a science and an art to being the Mayor Pro Tem. And it's a really important role in which we are bringing forward an agenda that serves our community in a meaningful way while actually maximizing our ability as a city to accomplish things, but things that work for our community within the capacity of the staff. And at the time, and I believe would be the same situation now, I served alongside a council that was very collaborative and really wanting to work together to figure out what are the best things that the city can do. And those things are things that sometimes are momentum that are pre-existing and we're riding and wanting to make sure we don't lose the momentum we have. Sometimes those things are opportunistic, they come up. And then other times those things are things we have to forge. And we forge them because they've come to us from our community. They've come to us because we as a collective body or as individuals within it have insights and experiences that identify actions that would really come to the benefit of the community. So I would pledge to bring my skill set that I have as previous Mayor Pro Tem, my role that I have in my professional job as a project manager where I balance complex and sometimes competing priorities to really figure out what's most important. And I think the other really important aspect of it is that the Mayor Pro Tem finds the nexus between the voice of the council, the mayor, and the staff and the community. And I pledge to really try hard to find, if not always the perfect nexus, the most efficient nexus and the one that's really in the highest and best service to our community. So I would be really honored to have your support tonight and pledge to work with everyone in their capacity to make sure that the year ahead we are able to be both responsive but also setting forth the best course of action for our city. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Counselor Larson, we will go ahead and take a motion now.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to elect Councilmember Scott Ohm as Mayor Pro Tem effective immediately, term to expire upon election of their successor.
Do we have a second? For the motion, we do need a second, yeah. Seeing no second, okay, so we have a second. Do we have discussion on the motion?
If I might, Mayor.
Councilor Larson.
We have 4 new council members and a new mayor. I don't know if anybody's noticed. I believe that calls for a new voice as the Mayor Pro Tem, and that's why I'm supporting Scott.
Thank you. Do we have any other discussion on the motion? Okay. Will the clerk please poll the council?
We have 6 nays and 2 ayes. Motion fails.
Thank you. So I will ask for another motion from anybody, Councilor Martell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to elect Rachel Holting as Mayor Pro Tem effective immediately, term to expire upon election of their successor. Second.
Thank you. We have a second by Councilor Snell. Do we have discussion on that motion? Councilor Holtby.
Yeah, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank my colleague, Councilor Ohm, for throwing his name in. I uniquely get to know the privilege of serving alongside Scott in District 2, and the depth of his knowledge and his passion and his commitment to this city, to our community, and specifically to District 2 is really just unmatched. So I look forward to only serving a year, and looking forward to supporting Scott in his next pass at Mayor Pro Tem. So I just really want to acknowledge and thank you for that.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to say that I will be voting in favor. Councilmember Holteen, I do not want this to be divisive in any shape or form. Councilmember Holteen and I have discussed this, and she has my full support. So we'll be lucky to have her as Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
We have 8 ayes. Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Congratulations, Mayor Pro Tem Holteen. Congratulations. Oh, sorry, we won't shake your hand. We're still. Yeah. Oh, air high five. That's what you get there. There you go. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 4. Councilor Wood, will you please introduce this item?
Yes, item number, item number 4 is a motion to approve an agreement relating to City of Wheat Ridge sales and use taxes between the city and Intermountain Health Lutheran Hospital. At issue is, as a part of its relationship with Lutheran Hospital, operated by Exempla at the old campus and currently by Intermountain Health at the new campus, the city has maintained agreements defining and quantifying the number of sales and use taxes paid to the city. These agreements have been amended multiple times to address changing conditions, but have always established a total payment amount and schedule. This mechanism has benefited both parties by making the administration of sales and use tax, as applicable to a complex operation, administratively streamlined. The parties have again revised the agreement to address both the provider's legal name change and, importantly, the relocation of the main hospital while retaining some hospital functions at the old campus.
Thank you. This is a motion before the council. This is not a public hearing, not quasi-judicial. Mr. Goff, do we have a presentation on this?
Yeah, City Attorney, Mr. Dahl will provide a little bit more background.
Thank you very much. Briefly, the issue as read gives you some background. As you well know, Lutheran Hospital has been an institution here in the city since the entire time the city's been incorporated. But their operation is complex in terms of the facilities and services that they render, some of which is tax exempt if you didn't look at the particular exemption or provision that's written into our code for hospitals, providing employment for at least 100 persons and providing at least 100 beds. So obviously that was written with Lutheran in mind, but in order to benefit from what amounts to a carve out from all of the very detailed application of the sales and use tax, we'd have to be tracking, for example, each each transaction. Well, is this an exempt transaction? Who's benefiting from the sale of this bandage? And is that subject to sales and use tax or not? And you can imagine the complexity of that with an organization like Lutheran. And so for over 20 years, the city and Lutheran have agreed to a one-size-fits-all agreement. And in fact, that's identified in our code. And the code says this applies to an organization, a hospital organization, 100 beds, employing 100 persons, and entering into a separate agreement with the city that covers the amount that will be paid. And I won't take you through the more laborious process of getting to the monthly number, but I work with the city's finance director, and over the years, that number has been increased and adjusted, and the parties remain happy with that number. And right now, it's in this agreement, it's $20,246 per month, and it increases by 5% in every second calendar year. So in January of 2028, we'll go up by 5%. And we've had escalator clauses in these agreements over the years, and this kind of continues that pattern. I should say that the agreement does not apply to, and by its terms doesn't apply to, private doctors providing private services, and those are still subject to our taxation regime. So private doctors don't get to fit under that umbrella. When Lutheran moved to the new campus, one of the questions was, well, does this exemption, should it apply to the remaining functions of Lutheran at the old campus? And we thought carefully about that and felt that it should, because the Lutheran operation was what was there. Yes, it is true they moved the majority of their operation to the new campus, but again, they're providing similar services at the few locations that are left on the old campus that they'll retain, most of them. And so we felt it was appropriate to specifically say, yes, those operations too, and we've identified them pretty specifically so that that exemption doesn't somehow get broadened and changed over time as other operations might be added or deleted. So that's the thumbnail sketch of this agreement. We're pleased to have it. We've been operating under kind of some temporary ones for some time, and this I think is pretty solid and will serve the city for a number of years. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. We have nobody signed up from the public to ask questions on this or comment on this, so I'll go to questions from council. Councilor Okada.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. Thank you for sparing us the mathematical process that gets us to that specific number. Is there a 50,000, 100,000 feet view that we can get that kind of helps us understand kind of the logic behind it?
Sure. Well, the best thing that I can do for that is to kind of think back to the several times in the past I've worked with the city's finance director to come to the number, as it were, and they've taken sort of a gross world look at the number of patients, for example, an average amount of medical supplies, et cetera, that might be, because of course one patient a small bandage, another patient an enormous amount of materials and equipment and injections, et cetera. But it's with our operation this large, it's capable of being sort of averaged because it's big enough that you can create numbers like that. And so I think that in the past we've taken sort of the main components of what we would be taxing individually and looking at, okay, what does that look like for 100 patients in a year? And be able then to apply that as against the sales tax rate and come up with a number that, and again, there's some exemptions for charitable operations, and they're charitable, but there's a kind of a non-charitable aspect of much of what they do as well. So that's the exercise we went through. It's almost like an amalgam of numbers, and you end up with kind of a process for just a numeric kind of tool that would give you that number. But to answer your question, we looked at the individual components and then did some averaging, and that gets us into what we believe is an appropriate ballpark.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Seeing none, Councilor Wood, will you please make a motion?
Yes, I move to approve the agreement relating to City of Wheat Ridge sales and use taxes between the city and Intermountain Front Range Incorporated, doing business as Intermountain Health Lutheran Hospital, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the same.
Second.
I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Holteen. Do we have discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
8 ayes, no nay, motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is, I believe, city attorneys matters or city manager matters? City managers matters.
City managers. Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick items. Our annual board and commission application period is open right now. This is for our annual reappointments and new appointments starting March 2nd, I believe. The applications are due this Friday, January 15th. So if anybody's interested, check out our website. There's a list of openings on the website, and also our application for our city clerk position is also available on our website. That closes January 23rd. That's all I have. Thank you.
City attorneys matters.
Actually, two quick things tonight are the city's longtime municipal court prosecutor, Donna Schneider, is retiring. And after serving the city for 20 years, we're really grateful to have her services. The prosecutor works under my direction, but honestly doesn't need much direction from me. I speak with the prosecutor a few times a year, making sure there's nothing we should be bringing to the council's attention in terms of the code of laws or anything like that. But Donna has covered that court, which meets Tuesday, Wednesday, and often on Thursdays. So it's a pretty vigorous and busy court, and she's handled that really capably, and we appreciate her help. She retires her last day's day after tomorrow. So I've been working with the court clerk to arrange for interim coverage, and we have interim prosecutors lined up for that. We have an RFP out for the permanent position, which again isn't a full-time position of the city, and it's an independent contract arrangement, as is common for prosecution for municipalities around the state. The Wheat Ridge Court is a larger court and takes up more time. Most smaller communities, municipal court meets once a month for about half a day. That's not true here. It's a very vigorous court and handles a lot of cases. So we'll want to make sure we get a prosecutor with the right qualifications. But the court clerk and I have been, we've done the RFP, it's out, and it'll get responses will come back later this month, and we'll get someone on board hopefully by the end of February. So that's report number one. Report number two is you appoint the municipal judge, and if memory serves, the judge was appointed around June of a year and a half ago, and the judge is appointed for 2 years. So Judge Lucero will be up for reappointment in June of this year. And I'm just putting it on your radar screen that I'll work with the judge and city manager to put together the materials necessary for you to consider the reappointment of Judge Lucero or any other judge, because of course you don't own that job other than for the 2 years you have it. I'm just letting you know that I'll be putting together materials to allow you to have whatever materials you need or interaction you need with the judges over the years. Council has wanted to have the judge come and just tell us what's going on in the court the month or so before reappointment. That may well be the right tool here, and it's probably the main tool I'll suggest. But I'll get that to you and ask for any comments you have so that when it does come in front of you, it's expected and not unexpected, and that you're comfortable with whatever process and don't feel as if it's been kind of dumped on you. All of a sudden, you've got to make that choice. And I wanted to take the time early to say that's coming up, and I'll put together a process for it and make sure that you're comfortable with that process. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. We'll go to elected officials matters, and we will start with Councilor Wood.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilor Okada.
Nothing from me tonight.
Thank you. Councilor Quinn.
Just real quick, got an email from Ree this evening. Susan and I are trying to set up a District 3 meet and greet update. Looks like January 31st at the rec center from about 9 in the morning to 10. Hopefully Mayor will be there as well. And also try and get hold of Amanda Harrison to give us a little help on advertising that, and also see if we can't get Alex from the police department to talk about the speed cameras and the red light cameras and the changes that I saw on social media. And that's pretty much it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Quinn. All right, going to Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And after a fairly quiet first week of the year, maybe it has to do with the weather, but today, all of a sudden, everything got kind of busy. But first off, I do want to thank the folks at Public Works for cutting through a lot of red tape between Excel and CDOT on who owns the light underneath in the underpass on I-70 at Garrison. That light has been out for more than 2.5 years now, and every one of the neighbors I talked to said they would not walk through that underpass at night. It's just dark. It's scary dark. So with the replacement of that light, it makes a big difference. It will, I think it will sort of enhance the general feeling of safety as we look through that neighborhood. It's a very busy intersection with the stop signs and everything. And having a light there at night makes a big difference. Today, I was walking my little pup, my little obnoxious pup, and we were walking the Greenbelt, and we came across the Tabor Lake Path project. It's going. They're moving dirt. There's people out there working. It's finally getting off the ground. So hopefully they'll be able to get this thing moving along fairly quickly, and the people that walk the Clear Creek Greenbelt, like I do, will be able to enjoy this nice new amenity provided by our Parks Department. And then on the other side, on the south side of the creek, kind of between the creek and where the very expensive houses are up on the bluff, the dog and I ran into some coyotes. There were 3 of them. They weren't in a pack, but they were running. And as we're walking along, one of them kind of tried to sneak up behind us, and I did what they tell me to do. I acted big, I yelled, and the dog barked, and that guy took off. I think his name was Wiley E. Coyote. Anyway, just be aware if you're on the Greenbelt, the coyotes are out. This is to the west of Prospect Park. And again, do it, if you encounter one, don't try to run away. Just act like a big, dumb human, and they'll get the idea.
You noticed a large uptick of Acme boxes being delivered?
I did see the empty box of dynamite.
Councilor Martell.
That's a tough one to follow. Okay, so I'd like to thank everyone who came out. We had our first District 1 office hours and coffee last week, and we had, I think, 3 district members, residents come, and we talked about traffic, and we talked about equity and inclusion, and had some good conversations. And our next coffee will also be at Mountain Milk within Wolf and Wildflower a week from tomorrow, 9 to 11. So please come out, and if you have any questions or just want to talk to Jenny or I, please join us. I also want to make a little shout out to my neighbor, who will be mortified if he finds out I did this. But my next door neighbor moved into his house in, I think, 1950, and has lived in Wheat Ridge longer than Wheat Ridge has been Wheat Ridge. And on January 21st, he will turn 100 years old. And we're super excited to celebrate him. And I just want to give him a shout out for being a part of the Wheat Ridge community for so long and being a great neighbor. And that's all I got today.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. At the last study session, everybody was talking about how they got through that, the CFI, and no one had said, "Hey, Councilmember Ohm, have you done it yet?" I had not. So I did it, and it was very easy. But I did notice that when you're on 38th and you're going southbound onto Wadsworth, people are they're turning right. when they shouldn't turn right. And so my suggestion is I think we need an additional sign at a lower level, kind of in front. And then I've noticed, not just there, but on 44th, people are just kind of ignoring. Nobody was coming, but they decided, well, I'm just going to turn right anyway. And then somebody had plowed through some type of metal sign at that southwest corner of Wadsworth and 44th. But having taken at least once, I was pretty impressed. And I'm glad that happened. The other thing that I'm glad that is happening is the installation of the red light camera at Kipling and 44th. And then having a speed camera at the bottom of Kipling and 38th. That is just so many accidents I've seen, and I'm really hoping that will potentially slow some people down. We just need to change the behavior, and it sounds like the behavior was being changed at Anderson. And so I think it's a good thing that we have the speed cameras and that trying to change that bad behavior. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to echo my co-councilors, thanks to everyone who came out for our coffee meeting. That is something that we are really excited to continue, because I think it's a really good time for folks to just pop in. You don't have to stay the whole time, but it's okay if you do. And as we get into the year, we're going to kind of move it around a little bit and hopefully catch some folks maybe on their way home from work as well. So it's not just going to be a morning meeting, but thanks to those folks that joined us. It's always great to connect with our community in different ways in our local businesses. And I also wanted to just mention, we finally got some seasonally appropriate weather. We got some snow, some cold temps, and I saw a lot of shoveling, and I just wanted to say thank you. That may not be true all over the city, but I know around our place, I saw a lot of shoveling and a lot of folks helping neighbors shovel. And that is something that I think we've talked about before, just that we may know neighbors who are not physically able to get out and shovel, and it's always a good idea to help. And in these times especially, it's always important to look out for our fellow community members and make sure everybody is safe. So thanks for shoveling, and hopefully we get more snow.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Well, thank you, Mayor Stites. I just have a couple of things. First of all, I just want to thank city staff, in particular Lauren Michalak, for continuing to work with the neighbors around the car wash on 44th Avenue. We had a meeting with those neighbors today, and the car wash is actually doing some changes to try and accommodate some noise reduction. City's working with the neighbors to get some additional sound study information, so that we've got some different metrics and measuring points that will really satisfy the impact that business is having on the adjacent neighbors and businesses. So I just want to acknowledge everyone is coming together and working towards resolution there. And then we don't meet next Monday, so I'm just going to mention a couple of meetings that I'm touching. Last week we had a DRCOG board meeting. One of the things DRCOG is working on is a regional housing strategy update, and it's been a pretty big undertaking. That will be concluding later this spring, and I think once that's concluded, it would probably be of interest for us to have that presented to us to better understand where we fit in the regional housing situation, so we can be seeing not just our own needs, but what that looks like regionally. So I will keep everybody informed of that. And then this week's a busy legislative week. We have our last meeting before legislative session kicks off with the legislative committee tomorrow. And then on Friday, I am meeting as part of the CML policy committee. And they are looking at a couple key things that are queuing up to come through the legislative session. One of the bills that is proposed that is of high interest to Wheat Ridge, and I connected with Patrick today about this, is they are looking to propose some reforms to urban renewal, which would be pretty onerous and would effectively make our urban renewal and TIF program like really ineffective. So we've got we're definitely looking at that, and CML is taking an opposed position, and that's something we'll be monitoring. So those are a couple things that have me busy. Not as fun as some of the other stuff you guys are talking about. I've not seen a coyote in the last week, but on my way here tonight, the neighborhood great horned owl flew right over my head, and a little less scary than a coyote, but still an apex predator. So anyway, I'll see everyone in 2 weeks.
Thank you. I saw a coyote on our way home from our meeting last week, actually. I saw one by the cemetery. Before I go into my stuff, Mr. Goff, we had a comment tonight about Lutheran, and can you talk a little bit about what they're planning to do there as far as saving the materials?
The deconstruction.
Yeah.
Yes, that is part of their plan, is to deconstruct and save as much as possible from the old hospital building. They already have a demolition crew on board, and they are scheduled to start demolition the end of this month. They're going to start with the old West Pines mental health building. That'll be first, and then sometime in February they'll be starting on the actual hospital building. But they do plan on deconstructing in such a way to preserve as much as possible. As you all know, the chapel will be preserved. We are looking at potentially preserving a portion of a 1932 portion of the building, which is on the west side, for if the city moves forward with moving city facilities to the site. So we're still looking at the possibility of preserving another portion of the building as well.
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Appreciate it. I wanted to give a special shout out and a thank you to our, I guess now former Senior Deputy City Clerk, Margie Greer, who just retired again. But she was phenomenal, helped several of us all get through the election and all that stuff this year, did a great job, has handled some of the petitions and that process over the last couple of years, but done a phenomenal job for us. So we just want to again shout out and thank Margie for that. This past Saturday, I had coffee with the mayor over at Mountain Milk. Great turnout. We had, I believe, about 25 people there. Several of the councilors came and showed up. I appreciate you guys coming to do that. And it's great to be able to interact and talk with the community and get those questions answered, things that have been burning on people's minds for a long time, and stuff that comes up kind of generically. So really thank everybody who showed up at Mountain Milk. Another shout out to our amazing staff, our assistant Ree and some of the staff are going to help us set that up for the whole year, it sounds like, to where we can go to different places every month and really spotlight different places in Wheat Ridge, because we have some really great restaurants and other areas of Wheat Ridge for people to check out. The other thing I want to talk about real quick, tomorrow's my first day emceeing the Wheat Ridge Business Association meeting, so I'm pretty excited about that, taking over for Mayor Starker on that. We've got a great group of business owners there. And then the Wadsworth Grant Program, the deadline has been extended to January 31st. I had a great meeting with the executive director of Local Works last week, who's back, yay Paige. But it's great to have her back in Wheat Ridge. But we've got several of the businesses on Wadsworth starting to file applications and take advantage of that program. So if you've got a favorite business on or near Wadsworth that was affected by the construction, please let them know to reach out to Local Works or to the business district and be a part of this grant program. We have no meeting coming up next Monday because it's Martin Luther King Day, but we do have a special study session tonight. So before we adjourn, I just want to remind everybody that, as Councilor Ohm said, slow it down a little bit. Take care out there, especially with the roads starting to become more wintry, and we have a great public works staff, but let's make sure that we do some of their job for them and stay off the roads when we need to. And then, as always, if you can find it by at Wheat Ridge. We will adjourn tonight for our meeting at 7:19, and then we will re-adjourn for our special study session at 7:19 and a half. So I am going to call to order the special study session for January 12th, 2026. We have one item on our agenda tonight, which is the equity audit. We already had public comment during our meeting, so I will just kick it right to Mr. Goff for our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have two of our wonderful employees here this evening, Marianne Schilling and Carly Siva, will both be presenting on this topic. I'll turn it over to Marianne.
Great, thank you. We're getting it all booted up over here. We are here tonight to give you a presentation on an equity audit. So I'm joined tonight here with Carly Siva, our Manager of People and Culture. And we are first going to share a little bit about the background, kind of how we got here. Carly will discuss the equity audit in detail. We'll go over this draft scope of work and then discuss next steps. So first, in talking about the Race and Equity Task Force, that's really how this all started in this conversation. So in 2021, we had the Race and Equity Task Force appointed by City Council. This group met for 2 years, every 2 weeks. And the goal was that they were directed by City Council to carry out a thorough review of city policies, services, ordinances, and to identify policies and practices that may contribute to discrimination. And ultimately, the task of the task force was to create a recommendation report for City Council and have it include ways in which the city could become a more inclusive community. Ultimately, the recommendation report had about 101 recommendations. It had 11 focus areas, and to date, we have 35 of those 101 recommendations that are either in motion or complete by the Race and Equity Task Force. Of note, some of the recommendations that have been completed is that for the city to join GARE, the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. We joined that in 2025 for the first time. Recommended a charter review. We did a charter review a couple years ago. Update the city's website and their communications for ADA accommodations. Another recommendation was to provide an alternate location for our homeless navigation team to support community court. So our municipal court for folks who have charges related to homelessness, to have that at a different location. We now have that at Jefferson Avenue United Methodist Church. And then one of the other highlighted completed recommendations was for City Council to create an ongoing IDEA committee. So the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Committee was a recommendation from the Race and Equity Task Force, and the City Council did create this IDEA committee. It was started in 2024. City Council created the scope of work. So part of the scope of work was to implement this recommendation report from the Race and Equity Task Force, but it was one of the 6 items in the scope of work for this IDEA committee. Others were to advise City Council on the policy and practices to make Wheat Ridge a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. Additionally, to advise City Council on the implementation of the recommendation report, to act as a liaison between the community and the City Council to bring forward issues and solutions related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city of Wheat Ridge. 4th, to organize events and activities that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. To promote diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the community, and to foster mutual respect and understanding of all persons. So before I turn it over to Carly, just to share that the group does have this recommendation report, and now we're in a position where it's about 1/6 of the ask of the committee, and they've still, over that time, accomplished about 1/3 of the recommendation report, which is quite impressive.
Thanks, Marianne. I'm going to tell you all a little today about what the IDEA Committee has been up to, some internal successes we've had within the city, and what an equity audit is. We have an amazing, engaged, and passionate group of committee members on the IDEA Committee. They've been tabling at a lot of community events, including Pride events, the holiday celebration, and trunk or treat. At those events, they've been introducing themselves to the community, raising awareness of what the IDEA Committee does. They've also been listening to staff members present on their respective divisions, learning about the challenges those divisions face and opportunities that the IDEA Committee can help provide feedback on. A couple of recent examples. A staff member came and presented on the Anderson Pool campaign engagement, and the IDEA Committee was able to provide some feedback about ways to best engage all areas of the community. Staff members also presented to the IDEA Committee regarding the city plan before publication, and so the IDEA Committee was able to provide some feedback as well on the city plan. Internally, we've also had a number of really strong successes. We've hired a bilingual judge. Judge Lucero speaks Spanish, so he is able to communicate
directly with participants in the language that they understand, reducing misinterpretation, miscommunication. Our police department has launched the Blue Envelope campaign. Blue Envelope is a visual signal individuals can use when they engage with law enforcement to let them know that there might have some special accommodations. To date, over 100 of those have been given out. We've also retooled the HR manager position. When it was vacated, the city was very intentional in creating the manager of people and culture role that encompasses IDEA in the scope of work. We've also created the bilingual incentive program, so employees are able to take a test, a fluency test, and upon passing, they receive an extra additional pay on their paycheck. Almost every department has somebody represented by the bilingual incentive program. We've also been updating our job postings and job descriptions to use more inclusive language and lower barriers to application and access, and make sure we're honoring lived experience for those who choose to apply to the city. We've done a thorough handbook review. We looked at our policies and guidelines, making sure we were keeping an eye toward IDEA the whole time. Our Parks and Rec department has also been very active as well. They have sensory kits for individuals to use at city events. They provide sensory swim hours, and they also offer adapted swim instruction to folks who might want that. Now, as far as an equity audit, this really came about following the Happiness Gardens incident. It pointed to the need for this, but it's really more directly related to the Race and Equity Task Force work. I'm fortunate enough to have been able to participate in an equity audit myself at my former organization. We took a close look at our internal and external policies and engaged the community in coming up with our recommendation report following the equity audit. An equity audit is really the systematic examination of city policies, procedures, practices, and culture, and it looks at disparities that might exist and affect certain groups. It does a close examination of policies and procedures, decision-making processes, representation and diversity within the city, support and access, and HR practices. And as I said, it can be focused both internally and externally, or both. The goals of an equity audit are really to find the blind spots that might exist within the city. We each bring our own perspective and lived experience to our work, but this allows a professional to really come in and look at it with their keen eye to areas that we might have blind spots or areas for improvement. We use that information to produce overarching themes, both positive and negative, including areas for growth. They produce this report by looking at things like our core documents. Those are things like handbooks, guidebooks, policy statements. They look at communications to our stakeholders, such as social media, emails, and newsletters. Talking to key stakeholders, which can be done a number of ways. Oftentimes they use focus groups or do individual interviews. And surveys are another tool that are often used that can be both internal or external. Other goals include really taking what information that they gather and creating strategies going forward to develop a roadmap that the city can implement. Ultimately, we want to create an inclusive, equitable, and accessible community where people feel like they belong. This adds a lot of value to in the city. It improves community engagement and well-being. It can create a sense of belonging within the city. It improves employee engagement and retention. And I think it's very important to note the city is brought in, the residents of the city are brought into this process. So it's really a solution by the people with the people. They help identify issues, help co-create solutions. So there's a lot of buy-in from those that help participate in the equity audit. And I'll hand it back to Mary Ann. Thank you.
So I imagine one of the things that you're thinking of is how is this different from the recommendation report? Is this needed compared to the recommendation report? And what I would say is that this is similarly aligns with what our sustainability committee went through, where we first had an action plan from our sustainability committee that was created by volunteers. They volunteered a lot of their time, but they weren't experts in the field. They have limited time and capacity. Staff was able to provide some content, and a lot of the recommendations are great, but it is different than what would be created if a consultant created it. Once the sustainability committee sort of reached a certain level of sort of readiness, then it was time to create a 5-year sustainability action plan that was then adopted by city council. And so we see this as sort of similarly in alignment, where it was first created by our residents with a lot of time and energy over the course of 2 years. And now I think that we're ready to take the next step and to look at what it might look like to have a professional consultant come in and do an equity audit. So what this would look like is that it would be composed of 4 parts. It would be evaluation, public engagement, outreach, a report and presentation, and then recommendation. The evaluation piece is where the city would get a review of city policies, practices, and trainings, codes, city services, a review the org structure, protocols, initiatives, community engagement, community programming, internal, external communications, program funding and expenses, city staff demographics, things like that. And those are the kind of things that should council give us direction to move forward with this, the scope of work in these areas would be great to get feedback on. If you want to add anything, if you'd like to remove anything, if there's anything that we're not catching enough of, this bullet point list would be helpful to get that feedback on. The next section, engagement and outreach, this aligns really well with the amount of engagement and outreach that we've been doing this past few years with all of our planning processes. So this is in line with kind of the level of the outreach that I think our community is accustomed to. So that would include things like our open houses, focus groups, interviews, surveys in the community. It would be different than some of you are familiar with our city's resident survey. That is more of like a one-way outreach where they just, they answer, but it's not a conversation, it's not a dialogue. You're not able to understand exactly why they responded to something a certain way. But in that sense, we do have a component in the resident survey that is 12 questions related to a community sense of belonging. So that's an additional tool that we do have. The equity audit and report and presentations, that would be that we would be asking any consultant to prepare formal presentations of findings to stakeholders, including city council staff, the community. If there's other groups like the IDEA committee, we could include that as well, to get a sense of the current state of the organization and any trends. And then finally, we would be asking them to provide a report and a recommendation. Additional component of this would to be able to provide some baseline data that we could use to compare ourselves and see how things change over time. So that being said, the ask really at this point is for you all to give us direction. Is this something that this group is interested in moving forward with? If so, does this scope of work sound good? Is there anything that you would like to adjust? And if we would like to move forward, then we'd be looking for consensus to return with a contract and a budget supplemental as well. So at this point, we're open to any questions and comments from City Council.
Thank you. We'll go to questions from council. Councilor Martell.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you both for this presentation. I think this is a really meaningful and meaningful project, and I'm glad we're looking at this audit in addition to the work that the Race and Equity Task Force has already done in our IDEA committee. I do have a question around, under the scope of work, the public engagement and outreach area. I think Wheat Ridge has done a really good job with all of the various plans and outreaches we've done on how we're engaging community. I also think that this area is somewhere we might need to do things a little differently, and I'd like to hear more about how we'll consider the outreach we've done already, or that we've done in the past. There are certain people that always show up, and that's great, but how are we finding those voices that haven't traditionally been included in this feedback? How will we make sure those voices are heard? How will we find those people that haven't heard the call in the past? And then also around that, safety for those people and maybe some anonymity, just so people feel like they can be honest and open in their feedback. Thank you.
I'll start, and then I'm sure you'll have more to add. One of the things that I would imagine is that we would get recommendations from our IDEA committee on some areas where we could reach out to members of the community who may not typically participate in these surveys. I think we'd also be really leaning on our consultant, who would be an expert in this space, and they would be able to provide a lot of additional feedback. And of course, anybody else in the community that would have good recommendations.
Just to add to that, I think the community is the best cheerleader for this. So those that are engaged, talking to their neighbors, talking to their friends, engaging them, letting them know this is the opportunity to have their voice heard within the city, and have their opinions and thoughts really incorporated into the equity audit results.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I have some questions that I want to ask, and I know I might sound like I'm attacking. I'm not. This is more my analytical mind trying to go through the process of trying to find information. And so these are some questions. So it might feel a little uncomfortable, but I sit up on the dais and I hear what I hear, or I don't hear things. So my first question is it talks about employees. Can you, within whatever scope you want to, can you give me an idea, like how big of a problem is it with city employees? Is this a little problem? Is it kind of a bigger problem? Or it's like, this is a really big problem with the city employees having the context of this discussion?
So one of the great things about our new Paycom system is we're actually able to pull some hard data around some of our retention rates. I do think I have heard things from employees that there are some issues within the city that we need to resolve. We've done trainings, we've done education, but I think another step forward would really be to do this equity audit and help show the city's commitment to this sort of work.
Thank you. And then I was curious about this, and so I did a little, web search. And I thought to myself, we are what's called a tier 1 suburb. We're surrounded by Denver, Arvada. And I thought, okay, what have other communities done? And Denver has a pretty robust equity that they've done. I didn't read the whole report. I saw Arvada had some. There's other communities. Some did equity reports on wellness, health. Some did equity reports based on business. Some based it on affordable housing. And so it kind of talked about all that. And so my question is, have you considered, in all these different municipalities probably paid a lot of money for these reports, have you considered looking at those reports? Because I'm very much in favor of the policy. I'm not so much in favor of the 60, 120K, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I'm just wondering, like, have you looked at those? Is there any merit if we were, before we went to pay this for our city, to look at those other reports and say, like, okay, here's a consensus that we could pull from that seems to kind of, be a common theme with these other communities that have done, like, I'm sure Denver has done a lot of this year after year, and just very basic looking at demographics, similar, not exactly same, but similar, because we are that neighbor, that tier 1. Have you looked at those other jurisdictional reports, equity reports?
We've looked at a couple. I've looked at Denver's. I've looked a little bit at Arvada's. We received the audit from Golden, so we took a look at that and got some pricing information and reviewed that. It's tough because they all have different scopes of work, and they were all kind of entered at different times. Golden sort of did an audit first. We did the Race and Equity Task Force first. And so they're all kind of coming at it in different timelines. And so, yes, there is overlap, but I think a lot of really great lessons learned from what our communities have learned. And I also think that Wheat Ridge kind of stands on its own and has some of its own unique community, needs and aspirations as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Holteen.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Carly, you mentioned that in a previous position that your organization had done an equity audit. Would you be able to share maybe like an example of what, like a finding from the audit and how it was used then by the organization, just to sort of get a sense? I mean, like, we are, as a city, we're constantly doing plans and prioritizations, but as staff, you guys actually do a lot of implementation. So I'm just sort of curious, like, how an audit might translate into like a meaningful, like, and measurable impact.
Of course. So our equity audit really gave us a lot of great information. Some of it was very internal focused, some of it was very external focused. Internally, some of the things they recommended were there was a couple policies they thought could be better adapted to DEI work. Some of those recommendations we chose to take, and some of them we decided didn't really work for us, which is totally your right to do. We also looked at our decision-making processes. That was some feedback we received from staff that they didn't feel included in decision-making. They didn't often know what was happening. So we took a close look at how decisions were made and made a more inclusive decision-making process that our employees felt like they really had a voice in. Externally, our community members really focused on sometimes the intent of the organization did not match the impact of it. So it really caused us to take a close look at what we were doing, knowing we were doing it sometimes with the best of intentions, but it might have been landing wrong. And so really reevaluating that based on some of that feedback we heard.
Thank you. You actually touched on something that I've found myself thinking about, just sort of looking into potential scopes here and how it aligns with work that we've done. And I've just really been thinking a lot, like there's the, inside, the internal facing and the external facing. And I appreciate the report that you gave of the things that have been implemented that were recommendations from the task force. And it seems like we've got at least, some body of work that is being taken seriously by city staff and being put to use. And so I wonder if there isn't a way of focusing this work in such a way that like we can have a better sense of like what are the things like from staff that feels like it needs the attention. Like I feel a little I feel flying a little bit half blind on this because I feel like we've got some stuff, but not everything we need. A whole body of recommendations from a professional consultant is really helpful. But like, I don't have a sense of what would be duplicative. And I admit before the conversation tonight, I was thinking, well, maybe we just start by focusing on like inside stuff that we have more control over and like really focusing on that to get started with, because if we're not functioning as a city function internally, then the external facing stuff, like we're going to better be able to support external stuff if we get our own internal house in better order, has been my thinking. But I'm also sort of hearing you talk about how those are actually interrelated, since a lot of what we are is a service organization. So I'm rambling just a little bit, but I guess it would be helpful to get a sense. I mean, are there specific areas that feel most important, or is this broader scale? Like, yeah, I guess I'm just looking for a little guidance of like, is there any duplication or overlap with the existing recommendations we have from the task force that could be leveraged, or do we really need to take a more like comprehensive look and let the consultant figure out where those land?
Yeah, and first I just want to say the city really is proactive in this and paying attention to this, and we are pretty unique in that across municipalities, that we really put a focus on this work. We're doing a lot of things, but I don't think we have a united effort. We don't have a lot of baseline information to drive some of our decision making, and so making data-driven decisions I think is really important in this. And so getting the feedback from our staff could really help us develop a roadmap that is intentional and thoughtful with baseline and metrics that we can use to track how we're doing.
Great. And then one last question. The IDEA committee includes the A, which is the accessibility, and we're calling this an equity audit, but to what extent would this work be embracing the accessibility aspect of the IDEA committee?
It's truly up to City Council if that's part of the scope of work that you're interested in pursuing. We'd be more than happy to include that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Okada.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you give us a sense of what we talk a lot about we've heard a lot about the professionals, the professional equity auditors that exist. Can you tell us a little bit about what that landscape of auditors look like, and maybe give us a sense of what the city's process for finding the right auditor for us would look like? I'm not even sure if there are there 3, are there 100 options for us to choose from?
So there's quite a few consultants in Colorado and across the nation. I can speak from experience. When we did our RFP for my past organization, we had over 10 applications. We conducted individual interviews with each of those to make sure they were aligned with where we wanted the equity audit to go within our organization. And I think we could follow perhaps a similar process for the city.
Maybe I'm looking also for a little bit of better understanding of like what that diversity looks like between the consultants in that regard. this might be either a confusing or unfair question, which is which is just it's fine on its own. But just let me know, is there some attributes of auditors that we are specifically looking for, or is it mostly defined by what our scope is and what we're trying to get in that area? Is there something about because I know that data-driven approaches here are going to be very important, and I imagine that a lot of these professionals are data-driven, and the results and the report that they're going to get us are very data-heavy and data-focused. But I'm trying to understand a little bit better. What would make one not a good fit?
So I think it's a little bit of both. I think part of it is driven by the scope of work. I think other things we would look for is, are they familiar with municipal government and doing equity audits within that space? Are they familiar with Colorado? I think those are questions we want to make sure we align the consultant we choose to make sure that they understand the city, how we work, how we operate, so that they can provide the best results possible.
Thank you. That helps me a lot. Only last thing for me to say, I'm excited about this process. Equity audits are really important. I've seen them done really, really well, and I've seen them done okay, but it feels like we're really well positioned to get this done really, really nicely. So thank you.
Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you both for your work on this. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things, and I have to be able to see my notes. I was thinking about what Councilor Hulteen was saying in the realm of how does this look in regards to us within the city, how we operate our departments versus our community. And I do agree there's good discussion to be had around that and good thinking in both of those areas. The way that I kind of look at this in my head is our IDEA committee are a group of very passionate, very dedicated folks that right now our structure is that we meet once a month and we focus a lot on community engagement and hearing from community and also providing feedback just from a personal, everyone's personal experiences within our community. And so the way that I'm thinking of this is our IDEA committee is working on that community piece, and the equity audit for me is really kind of like the rest of the story. And I'm not really asking a question at this point. I'm just kind of like, this is how I've kind of been through this process, being on Race and Equity Task Force, and then now being our fortunate enough to be our council liaison for the IDEA committee. But our IDEA committee are also very open to suggestions, feedback, all of those things. And so I'm just kind of, that's how I'm kind of, it works in my head right now. One question that I wanted to just kind of ask you, Carly, could you give we're relying a lot on your previous experience with this, and I'm so grateful for you and for that experience. Could you give a little example of what it looks like? Say, is it mostly surveys that are online, or is it someone coming in and having discussions with certain departments? What does a day in the life of a equity auditor look like, maybe?
So part of this work is meeting people where they're at, right? Some people respond really well to digital online surveys. Some people need to be talked to in person and really have that human connection to get effective feedback from them. So the equity auditor we work with, we were very intentional about the forum we set for those, how we engaged people to make sure we got the best results possible. And it really took a variety of methods.
That's, excuse me, that's great. One sec. I think I'm good right now. I appreciate that, and I'll probably have one more comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wood.
First of all, I think this is great because I think it's really, I think that the equity discussion is something that was started 8 years ago, a decade ago, and it seems to have fallen a little bit silent. So I'm glad to see that it's alive and well here in Wheat Ridge and that there are plans to move things forward. I think that's great. I've really appreciated hearing about the internal and the external parts of this because I think it does take both. And I do agree that you have to look first inside, but you also have to look outside. And it sounds like that's the plan. One question I had is about the baseline data and how it will be used. And I guess what I'm asking for is what kind of changes will we want to see? You know, what will the measurements be? What will the evaluation period be? What will we want to see that's different? Will it be a change in the makeup of the employees at the city? Will it be a lack of complaints outside? I'm just curious.
I think part of this is determined by the scope of work. We want to make sure that, we're really tailoring things where we want them to go. So again, from my experience, when we developed the survey questions, we developed the panel interview questions, we were very thoughtful about the areas we really wanted to focus on. And so we use that scope of work to really drive sort of that survey process and the interview process as well.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
And thank you, Mayor. And first, I'd just like to recognize and commend the effort and the time and everything else that's been invested in this process for a while by staff, by our residents. It is very impressive, and it shows a level of engagement that is encouraging. I do have a statement, though, I'd like to read here. At the October 27 council meeting, Council Member Hulteen proposed an amendment to the 2026 budget allocating $35,000 to hire a consultant to address an issue that was raised in a dispute involving Happiness Gardens. At that council session, I opposed the amendment, saying it was bad policy. I said that the last-minute timing of the amendment was inappropriate and that the scope was far too expansive and vague. The budget amendment was passed, and it was followed by a request for a study session to consider the item that we see on tonight's study session agenda. Tonight, we are asked to consider whether the city should move quickly to undertake a costly and potentially disruptive equity audit whose sole intent is to, quote, gain a greater understanding of where idea-related gaps may exist both internally and externally within the city. Tonight, city staff requests that council provide direction on a scope of work for this proposed audit. And then it lays out a long list of social, cultural, and ethnic considerations that is so far-reaching as to make any recommendation unworkable. Instead of trying to identify and exorcise every possible trigger and affront, I suggest a refocus that seeks a better understanding of where all of our residents believe and aspire for our city. As noted in the staff memo, quote, equity audits involve key stakeholders ensuring all groups are heard and are involved in identifying issues and finding solutions. I totally agree. The city can and should do more to actively engage its citizens in identifying issues and finding solutions. In a few weeks, council will address the forthcoming biennial resident survey. This effort is a thorough measurement of a representative sample of Wheat Ridge residents on issues of great importance. The survey questions range from the quality of life in our fair city, whether people from all backgrounds are welcome here, the quality of public services provided by the city, how safe they feel living here, where they shop, where they get their news, how well city staff is doing their job, and if the city is doing enough to support environmental sustainability. The resident survey will provide valid insight into how people support and interact with the city and a greater understanding of where idea-related gaps may exist. As council and staff, we have to do a better job understanding our residents and finding practical ways to engage them in the big decisions that must be made for the future of our city. For those reasons, I cannot support the development and production of an equity audit as described in the staff memo.
Thank you. Councilor Martell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to ask about, I know it will depend on the scope, of course, but in general, how long did the equity audit that your prior company went through take? And along those lines, we have the series of recommendations from the Race and Equity Task Force, and I think those are really valid and meaningful and very Wheat Ridge specific as they came out of dedicated Wheat Ridge volunteers and their work. And understand that this audit is more of a professional, objective, come in and look at what we're doing. So I anticipate some overlap and some differences. And in addition to the timeline, how does that impact work we're doing on the current recommendations? And then where there's overlap or differences, how will, knowing that our city staff is small but mighty and nimble, but have a lot of demands, we already have a lot of recommendations. This will result in more. What are the thoughts on prioritizing those against the recommendations we already have to ensure we're not just creating a lot more work and creating an overwhelmed environment?
I can speak to the timeline, but I'll let Marianne speak a little bit to the Race and Equity Task Force. When we did the equity audit, it took us approximately 4 months. Most of that time was spent gathering the data. After the data was gathered, a report was presented, and we shared that out with our board members, with our staff, and with our community. So there was also some time spent on disseminating the information discovered from the equity audit.
And I'll also share that we did look through our membership through GARE. We were able to look at other cities nationwide and some of the audits that they had done. The city of Ventura, California did one that was just internal. I think that took about a year-ish. And with it being a little more internal and the scope being a little bit smaller, it was cheaper than some of the prices that we kind of shared could be possible here. I would say that for how this compares to the recommendation report, I would say we are somewhat reaching a limit of what we can do internally with the recommendation report. There are certainly things that are still possible, especially like in courts. There's some good customer feedback components that we can include, things like that. There's also some areas in the recommendation report that are a little outside of our scope. So for example, one of the focus areas is education. And while we are really great proponents and supporters of it, we don't have as much power of how to immediately make those influences. And so some of those areas are a little bit tougher to touch. So I do think there, like you said, there will be some overlap, but we'll work on that internally to make sure that everything's kind of in alignment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Holteen.
Thank you. So I think this is great. And as Marianne was saying, when Sustainable Wheat Ridge started, it was a scrappy group of really passionate people who made a lot of progress, but it was incredibly opportunistic and dependent on buy-in from staff, sort of as staff bought in, and it was not as structural. What really made a difference was actually hiring a part-time sustainability coordinator that then really helped focus that. And I mean, what I'm hearing is that staff is doing good things opportunistically and with commitment, but it's at its limit. But what I've heard tonight from our colleagues is that what's important is that this is measurable and a data point that we can use to assess and set some goals. And so I'd like to propose maybe, I guess I'd like to propose a starting point for a scope of work here that would really focus on the kind of things that are a little bit more internalized, that we can actually measure and would have control, and would maybe keep the scope a little bit more focused. And with that can leverage the work of the IDEA committee that has a lot of engagement with the community. So I think one thing that I'm hearing from our staff, that their internal feedback, so including city policies, practices, and trainings, that's something internal to the city that would be useful to understand where we are and where we can improve. I also captured organizational structure. So what are staffing and organizational structure things that would make a difference for staff retention and that we could be measuring and reporting on? Protocols tends to fall in that too. Communications, internal and external communications, I think is important and something that we really interface with our community a lot. So internal and external communications. City staff demographics is something I've picked up as important and something that we can be tracking and measuring. And then community engagement is another piece that's been mentioned as important. So that is six focus areas for an equity audit. And I'm happy to repeat those, but I'd like to propose those as a scope for the city's equity audit.
Do we have a consensus? Or do we repeat them one more
Yep,
time?
yep.
Repeat 'em one more time?
Yep. This time with less phlegm. City policies, practices, and training, the first one. Organizational structure, protocols, communications, the internal and external communications, city staff demographics, and then community engagement.
Do we have a consensus on those as a starting point? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, there we go. Now we have a consensus. Okay. Anybody want to add on to that?
I would like to add not just city staff demographics, but city staff demographics compared to community demographics or city demographics. If that could be added.
Sorry, you mean like just our community, like our census demographics?
Councilor Okada.
I got a quick question, and this might be a question in this direction too, but when we talk about demographics being part of an equity audit, what are we capturing in that data that we wouldn't already be capturing from more standard city demographic analysis that we get from our community? I'm sure I'm missing something, but I think that might be a connecting point for me. Asked differently, what would an equity auditor bring to the table that's new in demographic information that we don't already have?
Yeah, so I can speak as far as employees. Right now, we capture gender, ethnicity. We don't capture such things as sexuality. We don't capture any other demographic, really. Employees have the option to provide that information, but oftentimes they do not. So we really don't have a ton of demographic information to go off of right now.
Questions? Councilor Wood.
Just thinking of the magnitude of the scope of work, the work that the task force has done in the past and the recommendations that came from that and the bulk of data that came from that, I realize that was volunteer prepared, not professional consultant prepared. But will that information be given to the consultant to be used so that it continues forward? I'm just wondering if it can somehow be useful and that it might be work that won't have to be duplicated.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll provide all that information and the work that the IDEA committee has completed.
No. Oh, Councilor Quinn.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it's always a good thing to have somebody else look at how your house is kept. I think these things that Councilor Hulteen has outlined will give us a good, we don't know what we don't know. And I think this will give us a good indication of if we might be just fine or we need to tune up here and there. So I think this is good. And I think if we don't do something like this, it might be when we find out there is a gap, we might have another incident like we've had in the past. And and nobody wants that. And so I think this is good to make sure we're running on all 8 cylinders and at a really good rate. So thanks for bringing this forward.
I don't see any more questions or comments from council. Staff, do you need more from us, from them?
Yes, I wouldn't mind getting clarification on the engagement and outreach effort. Does that component of the scope of work still sound good? Because that is a little bit external facing, and if we're being more internal facing, that may need to get adjusted.
I'm sorry, Marianne, can you say that again? You were talking fast.
Sorry. So in the draft scope of work, it had 4 components, as you can see here. The second one was public engagement and outreach. And so what you guys kind of just took a look at was the evaluation component. And so I'm wondering if, in us looking more internally, if there may be interest in updating the scope of work as it relates to the public engagement and outreach.
Councilor Mayor Pro Tem Hulteen.
Yeah. So I think I understand what you're asking. So because we're electing for a scope that's a little bit more looking inside the house, do we need to include the public engagement and outreach scope in this? I think my recommendation would be, I have a torn heart on this because I think without it, my inclination is always to go to our community, but this is also asking our community to have insight and expertise on something that they don't have a lot of experience with. So I don't know how constructive it would be, except for that some community engagement might be helpful for, I mean, again, because I have not done an equity audit, I don't know if that information would be helpful for the equity auditor in giving the recommendations for the inside the house stuff to better understand our community. So it doesn't seem as necessary. And because the proposal is for us to recommend a scope and then for you to be bringing back to us a proposed scope of work and contract, there's not an intermediary step where we would get to make a A/B decision there. So my inclination right now is no, but I would welcome input from others who have more experience with this in their professional lives.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilor Okada next.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you addressed this in Councilmember Hulteen. I think you might have addressed this a little bit, but this might be a question that that has an obvious answer, but I want to ask it anyway. When we're going through equity audit procedures here, if there is a biphasic nature to it where we do an internal audit to understand ourselves, and then we do an external audit to understand what our community is looking like and what they're feeding back to us, if it's biphasic, having a scope that is limited in our first run and then having the opportunity to be able to build on that, whether it be by another auditor or be by the IDEA committee, that feels like that might be a more sensible way for us to be able to approach that. I hear from Councilmember Larson that there's concerns about our scope and our budget, the amount of resources that we're putting towards this as well. And it does feel like if we are going to be incremental in our approach, it feels like there is steps to this program that we might be able to engage. But I want to ask, is that intuition that I'm feeding on my side as a layperson to the process in your mind accurate? Is that something that may be beneficial to our approach here?
Yeah, I think there's some merit to that, certainly. Speaking from experience, the way we bid out our RFP at our old organization, my old organization, was really in incremental steps. The first step was to do the equity audit. The second part was to develop and implement a training series. And so that's the way we decided to stair step it. But I think we could also stair step this a similar way, starting internal, moving to external, and then whatever the council decides.
Thank you. That's it for me for now. I want to hear others.
Councilor Snell.
Well, Councilor Okada said it very eloquently. I feel like those were the thoughts, and I just couldn't put it together like you did. But I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Just the idea of kind of what we've been most recently discussing of having it, focusing on us and how our operations. And then I would say this is probably going to be an ongoing conversation. Our IDEA committee is going to be involved. And so thinking about how we as the IDEA committee could pivot and or, add to, things that we're already focusing on, like community engagement, maybe there's something that we could add to a pop-up event or an outreach event. But using, making sure there's some framework around there to work in tandem with the equity audit that's happening. I also want to just point out something that came into my head, and I've said this a lot. I feel like I say this at IDEA committee, that we as a council have supported this work from the formation of the equity task force moving forward. And I want to just take a moment and recognize that this work isn't happening in all communities, and we have we deserve some kudos for that. And I know that there's some conversations and topics that seem to be sensitive, and they are, and the fact that we have an IDEA committee is huge. And I think that it's a huge advantage to us and our residents, and our community benefits from that and will continue to. It's a fact that there are inequities in our world. And I think that anything that we can do to make sure that we're working inside and outside of our city and in our community to make sure that folks are heard and seen and feel safe and all of those things, those need to happen. And I just want to give us some kudos as well for having gone through this process and supported this work this far. So that's what I got right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my fellow council members for bringing this up. So when I definitely agree that culture comes from the top down, and you got to have staff support. And when staff is saying we have a problem, that means a lot to me because I want to fix those problems. I want our employees to be retained and to do well. And I think once we have that, that is our foundation, and then we can spread the good word. Perhaps what I kind of saw Mayor Pro Tem saying about, I could see kind of the little bit of a turn of looking at this work is perhaps we could look at this as kind of a phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 would be doing the internal, let's get our house in order. And then phase 2, for me, feels like it wants to be next year because of money. When I think about accessibility, for instance, on my mind, I'm thinking about the built, like I look at that Grange and I think like, is that inclusive? It doesn't have any ADA access. No, it's not. And I would love the money to go there and that being an inclusive place. And so that's where I get just a tiny bit frustrated of like, so now we're going to talk more about things that are not inclusive, but I want to get this built so it can be inclusive. And so I would have strong support if we could do the phase 1, phase 2, like Mayor Pro Tem said, for kind of what I'd call the phase 1. And then next year, we got it on our radar. Staff is coming with some really good concerns. And Councilmember Snell, I think you're doing a great job. And then that's that phase 2. It's like, okay, now we've kind of got our house in order. Now we can do that phase 2. I would feel a little more comfortable next year appropriating that money. But I do want to be cognizant of like, we have that supplemental money, and I just get a little nervous this year about the way things are, and I want to make sure that I'm thinking this through long term. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Wood.
I have no real issue with the phase 1, phase 2 approach, except one thing does bother me a little bit is that I think a full assessment of how things are working internally also has to do with how they're viewed externally and how services are received by people who live here, for instance. And there's probably a number of other things too that I just can't think of right now. So it seems it's a little difficult to completely divorce the two from each other because they're sort of intrinsically related. Still, I think there's a way, I'm sure there is a way to do it in a phased approach where you figure out how you knit them back together and how you relate them, and yet doing them somewhat, like I said, in phases. But I just don't think we can lose sight of the fact that the public input and the public engagement part of this is going to be necessary at some point in order to achieve what we want to achieve with it. So.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Do you need another consensus on that, or does that answer your question?
I think it's good for me if it's good for you.
Okay. Anything else from the council then? Excellent. Okay, we'll move on from item number 1, go to item number 2, staff reports. Okay. Any elected officials reports? Anything you forgot? No? Okay. Well, seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn our special study session tonight. It is 8:14. We will be back not next week because of the holiday, but in 2 weeks for another regular meeting. And we are adjourned.